Hey there, ready to dive into a Texas-sized story?
Always up for a good deep dive, especially one in Texas.
Today, we're headed to Conroe, a city just north of Houston. It's been making headlines with its explosive growth.
I've heard about that. Seems like everyone's moving to Texas these days.
It's true. So imagine you're thinking about relocating there. What would you want to know?
Hmm, good question. Probably a mix of things, right? The history, the vibe, the challenges.
Exactly. And we've got some great sources to help us paint that picture. We've got Conroe's Wikipedia page, which gives us the official narrative.
Always a good place to start.
And to get a more personal perspective, we've also got this amazing website that captures life in Conroe before the 1990s.
Oh, wow, that sounds like a gold mine. You can learn so much from those firsthand accounts.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. Conroe was founded back in 1881 by Isaac Conroe.
Isaac Conroe, any relation to?
He was a former Union cavalry officer who became a lumberman.
Ah, so lumber was the foundation of Conroe. Makes sense, given its location in East Texas.
Right. His sawmill basically kickstarted the whole town. It's amazing how often a single industry shapes a city's entire trajectory.
Well, it's true. It's like that initial spark that sets everything in motion. And Conroe's story is a great example of how that initial industry, in this case lumber, can have a lasting impact, even as a city evolves and grows.
And evolve it did. Fast forward to the 1930s, and Conroe strikes oil.
Oh, wow. From lumber to oil, talk about a dramatic shift.
Suddenly, this little lumber town is swimming in black gold. And get this, for a brief, glorious moment, Conroe held the title of the city with the most millionaires per capita in the entire U.S.
Wow, the city with the most millionaires per capita. That's a pretty impressive claim to fame. What a story.
What does that tell you about Conroe's character?
Well, it definitely speaks to a certain boom or bust mentality, a willingness to take risks, chase fortune.
Makes sense.
But it also makes you wonder about the long-term consequences of that kind of rapid growth. Was it sustainable? Or was there a price to be paid for such sudden prosperity?
Great questions. And it's worth noting that both lumber and oil eventually faded as dominant forces in Conroe.
So what happened? What filled the void?
The city gradually transitioned into what many see as a bedroom community for Houston. But even as it evolved, that boom and bust legacy continued to shape its identity, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Those early experiences leave a mark. They become part of a city's DNA.
And that brings us to modern-day Conroe.
The Conroe we hear about on the news, the one that's booming again.
Exactly. Between 2015 and 2016, Conroe earned another impressive title, the fastest-growing large city in the U.S.
Wow, so that boom or bust cycle is repeating itself in a way.
You could say that, but this kind of growth is bound to bring new challenges, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Rapid growth always comes with its own set of issues. Growing pains, you could call them. What are some of the challenges Conroe has been facing?
One of the biggest controversies has been around Conroe's annexation policies.
Annexation, so they've been expanding their city limits.
The city's been steadily expanding, absorbing surrounding communities.
I bet that hasn't gone over well with everyone.
And you'd be right. Not everyone's been happy about it.
You know, that clash between a city's desire to grow and the concerns of existing communities is something we see a lot. It's that constant tension between progress and preservation.
For example, the April Sound community actually launched a legal battle against the city.
They didn't want to be annexed.
Exactly.
Did they succeed?
Ultimately, no. But their fight highlights a real tension between a city's desire to manage growth and the concerns of communities who want to keep their independence.
Makes you think. If you were living in one of those annexed communities, how would you feel about suddenly becoming part of Conroe?
It's a tough one. I imagine there'd be mixed emotions, excitement about potential benefits, anxiety about the unknown, maybe even resentment.
Yeah, that loss of autonomy can be hard to swallow.
It definitely raises questions like, what does it actually mean to be part of a community? Where do individual rights end and collective needs begin?
Those are questions that Conroe will continue to grapple with as it grows.
Speaking of growth, let's talk about Conroe's natural surroundings for a bit. The city sits within the East Texas piney woods ecosystem.
Beautiful part of the state, known for its towering pines, diverse wildlife.
It is. But as with so many rapidly growing areas, there's a tension between development and conservation.
Makes sense. Progress often comes at a cost, especially to the environment. What are some of the environmental issues they're facing in Conroe?
Well, our sources mention a fight to protect the W. Goodrich Jones State Forest from commercial development. This isn't just a local issue either. It reflects a global dilemma. How do we balance economic growth with environmental protection, especially in a rapidly developing area.
It's a tough balancing act, that's for sure, and it's a question that every growing city has to grapple with.
And speaking of challenges, Conroe is facing some serious ones when it comes to water.
Water? I hadn't heard about that.
The city relies heavily on groundwater, which is being depleted at a pretty alarming rate.
Oh, that's not good. Especially in a state like Texas that's prone to drought.
Exactly. So the Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District stepped in and mandated that Conroe reduce its groundwater usage. But the city pushed back. They actually sued the district.
They sued the Groundwater Conservation District. Wow, that's a bold move.
And it gets more complicated. They also got into a dispute with the San Jacinto River Authority over water usage fees when they started using surface water from Lake Conroe.
So it sounds like they're caught between a rock and a hard place.
They need to reduce their reliance on groundwater, but they're facing pushback against alternative solutions.
That's a tough spot to be in. It really highlights the complexities of water management, especially in a region prone to drought.
And as if water scarcity wasn't enough, Conroe's also had to deal with devastating floods.
Floods. I didn't realize flooding was an issue there, too.
Our sources mention a series of 500-year floods, including the impact of Hurricane Harvey back in 2017. These events have caused widespread damage, forced evacuations.
Wow, that's intense. Talk about adding insult to injury.
It's a reminder that nature has a way of humbling even our most ambitious plans.
And it raises important questions about infrastructure, about disaster preparedness,
Right.
about how cities can adapt to a changing climate.
These are all things that anyone considering a move to Conroe would want to take seriously.
Absolutely. It's all part of the bigger picture. You know, it's interesting to think about how these natural disasters can shape a city's character.
How so?
Well, think about it. Conroe's gone through these cycles of booms and busts, dealt with floods and droughts. It's likely fostered a sense of resilience, a strong community spirit.
I see what you mean. When people face adversity together, it can definitely bring them closer.
Exactly.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the people who call Conroe home.
The human side of the story. Always important.
The 2020 census paints a picture of a city that's becoming increasingly diverse.
How interesting. How has the demographic makeup changed over the years?
Back in 2000, the city was about 54% white and 33% Hispanic or Latino. By 2020, the Hispanic or Latino population had increased to 42%, while the white population had decreased to 50%.
So a pretty significant shift in just 2 decades.
We also see smaller but growing populations of Black or African American, Asian, and mixed-race residents.
That's pretty typical of what we're seeing across the country. Makes you wonder how this changing demographic is shaping Conroe's social and cultural landscape.
Yeah, it makes you think. Are different groups interacting, integrating? Are there tensions, opportunities for collaboration?
Exactly. These are questions that anyone moving to a new city would want to explore.
Diversity can enrich a community, but it can also bring challenges if resources and opportunities aren't equitably distributed.
Couldn't agree more.
And speaking of resources and opportunities, our sources also mention Conroe's economic indicators. The median income in 2020 was around $50,000,
Which is?
slightly below the national average, and there's a poverty rate of about 16%. So while the city is experiencing economic growth, it's clear that not everyone is benefiting equally.
Right. It's always important to look beyond the numbers and consider the lived experiences of people.
Absolutely. What are some of the factors contributing to poverty in Conroe? Lack of affordable housing, access to quality education, job training programs.
Or deeper systemic issues. It's likely a combination of factors.
Probably. Systemic issues like discrimination, limited access to health care, lack of social mobility can all trap people in cycles of poverty.
Tough problem to solve.
It is. But thankfully, there are organizations working to address these challenges, support those in need, like the Montgomery County United Way.
They do great work. Lots of local chapters across the country.
They provide funding to a wide range of programs, from early childhood education to disaster relief.
That's fantastic, making a real difference in people's lives.
And the Salvation Army provides food, shelter, other essential services to those experiencing homelessness.
Essential services, especially in times of need. Okay, so we've touched on the challenges, but let's dive into Conroe's economic landscape.
Sounds good. We talked about those boom and bust cycles, but what's driving the city's economy today?
Yeah, what are the major industries in Conroe these days?
One thing that might surprise you is that education is actually the biggest employer.
Education. Really? I wouldn't have guessed that.
Conroe Independent School District is massive. Thousands of teachers, administrators, support staff.
Well, it makes sense when you think about it. Education is a fundamental need. And as a city grows, so does its need for schools and educators.
Exactly. And right behind education, in terms of employment, is Montgomery County itself.
Mhm.
Government jobs play a big role in Conroe's economy.
Law enforcement, public administration, all that.
All of it.
So we're seeing a strong presence of both the public and private sectors. What about other industries?
Healthcare is a major player, Conroe Regional Medical Center being one of the top employers, and of course, retail.
The usual mix of big box stores and smaller businesses.
Exactly.
What about manufacturing? Does that play a role in Conroe's economy?
It does. Companies like Medivators, which make medical devices, and National Oil Well Varco, which is in the oil and gas industry, they contribute to the city's economic diversity.
So still some ties to the oil and gas industry. Interesting.
And then there's that fascinating story about the almost relocation of Exxon's headquarters back in the early 1980s
Exxon.
to Conroe.
Imagine the impact that would have had.
It would have been huge. What happened? Why didn't it happen?
Well, the oil bust put a stop to those plans.
Ah, that makes sense.
It's a reminder that even the best laid plans can get derailed.
But it also speaks to Conroe's resilience. The city weathered those economic storms and has continued to evolve.
Speaking of evolution, let's talk about Conroe's cultural scene.
The cultural side. Tell me, what is there to do in Conroe?
It might not be the first city that comes to mind when you think of arts and culture,
I'd agree with that.
but it actually has a surprisingly vibrant side.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, first of all, it's clear that Conroe loves its history. Makes sense. Lots of cities in Texas are proud of their history.
We've got the Heritage Museum, the Lone Star Monument, and Historical Flag Park, the War Memorial Park, all dedicated to preserving and honoring the city's past.
It suggests a community that values its roots, its heritage, trying to understand where they come from.
Right. And it's not just about those big historical events. Remember that website focused on Conroe before the 1990s?
The one with all the personal touches.
Exactly. It captures those smaller, everyday moments that make up a city's life. The cruising culture, the high school football games.
Even Elvis's visit to Conroe.
Exactly.
Those seemingly insignificant details can actually be the most revealing. They tell us a lot about a community's values, its social dynamics.
Right. Like, who knew that Elvis Presley once graced Conroe with his presence?
Adds another layer of intrigue to the city's story.
And speaking of layers, Conroe's got more than just historical charm. It's got a surprisingly lively arts and entertainment scene.
Really? I have to admit, I'm surprised to hear that. What kind of venues and events does Conroe offer?
Well, there's the historic Crichton Theater. It's been hosting live performances since the 1930s.
The 1930s, wow. It must have seen a lot of history.
It started as a movie theater, fell into disrepair for a while, but then it was lovingly restored.
A classic tale of decline and revival.
Now it hosts all sorts of live performances. Plays, musicals, concerts.
A testament to the community's dedication to preserving its cultural heritage.
And the Crichton's not alone. Conroe also has the Owen Theater.
Another theater.
A newer venue, adds to the city's theatrical offerings.
Okay.
And then there's the Young Texas Artist Music Competition.
What's that all about?
It brings in talented young musicians from all over the state. The winners go on to perform at prestigious venues. Conroe's got talent.
It's always great to see a city that embraces and nurtures creativity, provides opportunities for artists to grow.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for something a little more offbeat, more accessible, there's the Art Bench Project.
The Art Bench Project, what's that?
They took ordinary stone benches all around downtown Conroe and had local artists transform them into works of art.
Oh, that's cool.
Each bench tells a different story about Conroe. Its history, its people.
That's a fantastic way to inject art into the everyday landscape, making it accessible to everyone.
Right. And it's not just about pretty pictures. These benches tell real stories about Conroe.
Give me an example.
Well, you can find benches dedicated to historical figures like George Strake, the oil tycoon who put Conroe on the map during the Boone Jays.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
Or Charles B. Stewart.
The controversial figure linked to the Lone Star flag.
Exactly.
So they've got benches celebrating the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And the artistic. There are even benches that celebrate the city's vibrant theater scene. It's like a scavenger hunt.
I love that idea, encouraging residents and visitors to engage with the city in a different way.
So we've talked about Conroe's past and present. What about its future? What do you think the next chapter holds?
Well, based on everything we've learned, I think Conroe is at a crossroads.
What do you mean?
Well, it's grappling with rapid growth, Water challenges, economic transitions.
All while trying to preserve its unique identity.
Exactly. The choices it makes in the coming years will determine what kind of city it becomes, whether it embraces growth in a way that benefits everyone, protects its natural resources, fosters a vibrant and inclusive community.
It's almost like the city is going through an identity crisis, isn't it?
Yes, and that's a tension that many cities are facing today.
It's true.
And it's not just up to city planners and politicians to figure it out either.
We all have a role to play, right?
Exactly. We as citizens all have a role to play in shaping the communities we live in. Our choices, our actions, our voices, they all matter.
That's such an important point. We often think of history as something that happened in the past, but we're all making history every single day.
That's right.
And these deep dives remind us that it's not just about learning about the past, it's about understanding the present and envisioning the future.
Connecting the dots, recognizing patterns, and figuring out where we fit into it all.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this exploration of Conroe, let's turn our attention to something that often gets overlooked in these discussions about cities and towns.
What's that?
The personal stories, the individual experiences that give a place its soul.
I love that because at the end of the day, it's the people who make a place what it is. Their stories, their struggles, their triumphs, it all contributes to the rich tapestry of a community.
And think about that website we've been referencing throughout this deep dive, the one focused on Conroe before the 1990s.
The one curated by someone who actually lived there.
Exactly. The one curated by someone who actually lived there.
It's not just a collection of historical facts and figures.
Right.
It's a window into a specific time and place, you know?
I know what you mean.
Seen through the eyes of someone who experienced it firsthand.
And those personal touches are what make history come alive.
It's like those curated playlists of 8-track jams they have on the website.
Oh, yeah.
Or the scanned yearbooks with the witty commentary.
You can practically hear those teenagers flipping through those yearbook pages.
Yeah.
Don't forget those AI animated photos of Conroe icons.
Oh, right.
It's a little uncanny valley, but it definitely adds a layer of whimsy.
Yeah, a little creepy, but fun.
Personality.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about dates and events.
Right.
It's about the people who lived through them, the everyday experiences that shaped a community.
And it makes you wonder about the stories that haven't been told yet.
Like what?
Like, what about the people who moved to Conroe during that recent population boom?
Yeah, that's true.
What are their experiences?
Mhm.
What are their hopes and dreams for the city?
That's a great point. Conroe's story is still being written.
Yeah.
It's important to capture those diverse voices, those new perspectives that are shaping the city today.
Absolutely. And it makes me think about something else. This deep dive is focused on Conroe,
Right.
but every city, every town has its own unique story to tell.
Absolutely. Every place has its own history, its own challenges, its own triumphs.
Its own cast of characters.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you, dear listener?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
Maybe it inspires you to dig deeper into your own city's history, to uncover those hidden stories, explore those forgotten corners.
Or maybe it encourages you to share your story,
Oh, that's good.
to add your voice to the collective narrative.
I like that.
After all, history isn't just something we read about.
Right.
It's something we create together.
Well said. And on that note, it's time for us to wrap up this Conroe deep dive.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
From its humble beginnings as a lumber town to its booming city on the rise, Conroe has proven to be a place of resilience, transformation, and endless possibilities.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
The city's booms and busts,
Mm-hmm.
its natural beauty and environmental challenges, its changing demographics, its dynamic economy, and of course, its vibrant culture.
Lots to unpack.
But as with any deep dive, we've only just scratched the surface.
There's always more to discover.
More stories to uncover, more perspectives to explore. So we leave you with this. Keep those minds curious,
Yes.
those hearts open, and those exploration boots ready.
Absolutely.
The world is full of amazing places and stories just waiting to be discovered.
Until next time, keep on deep diving.